Does YK-11 act as an aromatase inhibitor and 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, effectively lowering serum estradiol and testosterone levels? Is injectable YK-11 as awesome as people make it out to be? Is it really that much more potent compared to running YK-11 orally or sublingually? After 2 weeks on 30 milligrams daily, I can conclude that injectable YK-11 feels like Trenbolone, tastes like Superdrol, looks like Anavar, and smells like, well, keep watching to find out more. Vigorous Steve here. This injectable YK-11 before and after video is an extra addition to the YK-11 deep dive video and the YK-11 addendum livestream video, which I released at the beginning of this year. And back then, people weren't 100% sold on the results I got, as I was running a cocktail of polypharmacy, including testosterone, nandrolone, trestolone, YK-11, oxymetholone, growth hormone, Increlex, and a handful of ancillaries. As part of this Operation Follistatin experiment, I decided to remove all of the fluff and just stick to a testosterone enanthate base of 625 milligrams weekly, and then cycle through various follistatin secreting compounds or actual follistatin 344 to see which of these compounds are actually worth running. First, I ran epicatogen between 180 milligrams to 900 milligrams daily, which was a fun experiment. I got some great results, but at 900 milligrams epicatogen daily, my high-sensitivity C-reactive protein shot up to the moon and ended up at 21.8 milligrams per liter, which is in the cancer and cardiovascular disease territory. Luckily for me, HSCRP dropped down to 2.8 milligrams per liter a week after stopping the epicatogen experiment and is now perfectly in range again. Next up was 30 milligrams oral YK-11 daily for 2 weeks, followed by 30 milligrams sublingual YK-11 daily for 2 weeks, and then finished off with 30 milligrams injectable YK-11 daily for the last 2 weeks of this experiment, and this is exactly what this video is about. And I'll finish off this Operation Follistatin experiment with another 2 weeks of 1 milligram follistatin 344, intramuscularly daily split bilaterally for the last 2 weeks, and then I think I'm ready to throw in the towel and go back to TRT before my organs explode. Now, I discussed sublingual YK-11 at length in the YK-11 deep dive. Give it a watch if you haven't already, as this video is an extension of that deep dive and builds upon what I mentioned there. But since I'm a nice guy and all, here are the cliff notes from the YK-11 deep dive. I added some additional information as well. Here are the evidence-based unique characteristics of YK-11. YK-11 activates the androgen receptors but doesn't bind to the estrogen or glucocorticoid receptors, stemming from an in vitro study using C2-C12 mouse fibroblast cells. And this exact same study showed that YK-11 increases bone mineralization and bone formation, which was comparable to testosterone at the exact same dosage range. And this same study also showed that YK-11 increases intercellular follistatin levels between 550 to 800%, which was a duration-dependent result. And in another study investigating an animal model using male BALB/C mice with bacterial sepsis, YK-11 was shown to increase serum follistatin levels between 10% to 13% in a dose-dependent fashion. And the same study showed that YK-11 reduces intramuscular fat mass. YK-11 didn't increase ALT and AST liver enzymes, but did increase blood urea nitrogen levels slightly. And YK-11 prevents muscle wasting, reduces organ damage and mortality during this sepsis study. And this was observed between 350 milligrams YK-11 to 700 milligrams YK-11 per 1 kilogram of body weight daily. And calculating these dosage ranges to the human equivalent dose just makes you realize how unrealistic these dosages actually are. For example, a 100 kilogram bodybuilder would need to consume between 2,840 milligrams YK-11 to 5,676 milligrams YK-11 orally daily, albeit split in 3 servings if you will so desire, to get an increase in serum follistatin level between just 10 to 13%. Now, what we're obviously after is an increase in intracellular follistatin levels. Follistatin doesn't really do much in the bloodstream. And if we go with that single in vitro study using C2-C12 mouse fibroblast cells, we might be able to expect an increase between 550 to 800%. And in another in vitro study using C2-C12 mouse fibroblast cells, it was speculated that YK-11 might inhibit 5-alpha reductase type 2 enzymes, which are generally expressed in the skin and scalp after puberty in humans. And yes, I did check my serum DHT levels before and after this YK-11 experiment, but unfortunately in the before blood work results, my serum DHT levels were over 2,500 picograms per milliliter, and beyond that, they don't detect any further. Again, keep in mind that I'm running 625 milligrams testosterone enanthate and all, and it's very common for such a tier 3 for 3 people that your serum DHT levels are going to be out of the detectable reference range. I did check it again following this experiment, but with a 2 to 3 week lead time, you're going to have to patiently wait and look for the comment section down below when I finally get those results in. Maybe it came down within the detectable range, and then we can have some hard evidence that serum DHT levels did decrease from undetectably higher ranges to somewhat in the reference range. But it wouldn't surprise me if both results before and after of this YK-11, my serum DHT levels ended up over 2,500 picograms per milliliter. And that means I kind of wasted $120 on that blood work result. Now, this doesn't mean that YK-11 is hair safe, right? Even though it might act as a 5-alpha reductase type 2 enzyme inhibitor, YK-11 itself might cause hair loss, albeit that that's generally not reported anecdotally on Reddit or various steroid message boards. And lastly, in a more recent study in an animal model using rats, YK-11 was shown to have similar neurotoxic effects in the hippocampus compared to other anabolic androgenic steroids, so at least we get the same level of damage. And the same study also showed that YK-11 increases oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction in the hippocampus by increasing pro-inflammatory interleukin-1b and interleukin-6 cytokines, and it reduced anti-inflammatory interleukin-10 levels, but swimming exercises counteracted the IL-6 effects and elevated IL-10 levels. So if you're going to take YK-11, take your antioxidants, take your mitochondrial support stack, and also do some fucking exercise. Swimming exercise already counteracts some of the negative effects that YK-11 might potentiate in the hippocampus. Anyway, there's a lot more information in the YK-11 deep dive and the YK-11 addendum livestream video. Give those a watch if you haven't already. Let's proceed into the Operation Follistatin base protocol and what else I was doing and running at that time, so you can see what the base protocol was when I was cycling through the various YK-11 administration routes. Again, I was running 625 milligrams testosterone enanthate coming from Bayer Testiviron, half an ampule Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, injected subcutaneously for a total weekly steroid intake of 625 milligrams total, obviously, and nothing else. No Primo, no Nandrolone, no Tristelone, no Trenbolone, nothing else, guys. Very, very boring, but this is what it takes to do an experiment properly, allegedly. And besides that, I was running a DHEA, 37.5 milligrams daily, telmisartan, 40 milligrams upon waking daily, ezetimibe, 10 milligrams upon waking daily, 50 milligrams fluvoxamine before bed daily, 10 milligrams methylene blue, 5 times per week on workout days. And again, there might be potential SSRI and MAUI, serotonin syndrome, drug interactions between fluvoxamine and methylene blue, but so far so good. No serotonin syndrome was observed as of yet. And nootropics I cycle in as needed because I got a boatload of work to do, and nootropics help with that tremendously. 10 milligrams oral dihexa, 10 milligrams oral Nupept, 25 to 50 milligrams bromantane, maybe 500 micrograms intranasal Sumax. And that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, sometimes I would take Relamind Respawn, cycled in maybe twice a week. So that will be my nootropics, and I don't think that any of these compounds besides the ezetimibe really have a dramatic effect on my blood work results. Well, obviously DHEA would increase my DHEA sulfate and estradiol levels, but it was stable all the way through. So we have a valid before and after blood work result. And I took the following over-the-counter supplements throughout the entirety of this experiment and the previous epicatogen experiment. Let that scroll a little bit. A lot of information will be on the screen. And the only real change which I made since the epicatogen experiment to the end of the YK-11 experiment is that I stopped Grillamide citrus bergamot because I wanted to try Amla extract from Himalaya Organics. I ran 600 milligrams Amla extract with breakfast and dinner, total 1200 milligrams over the day. And as you can see from my before and after blood work results, my serum lipid concentrations are pretty much comparable, even though I added in 210 milligrams YK-11, which is an oral anabolic androgenic steroid, albeit injected, obviously, at the end of the experiment. 210 milligrams additional anabolic androgenic steroids on top of the 625 milligrams testosterone base that I was running, and my lipids are pretty much the same, leaving me to conclude that Amla extract is maybe a little bit more potent than citrus bergamot. And the rest, again, is pretty much the same. All the details are on the screen. Let that scroll a little bit. And let's move over to the actual YK-11 protocol. To all of this, I added YK-11 for 6 weeks at the exact same dosage, daily of 30 milligrams, but with various administration routes. Day 1 to 14, I took 15 milligrams YK-11 orally upon waking and before bed. Again, total 30 milligrams daily. So 2 weeks oral YK-11, 30 milligrams daily. Then from week 3 to 4, day 15 to 28, I switched to 15 milligrams sublingual YK-11 upon waking and before bed, still 30 milligrams daily. So the reason why I take it morning and evening is because I took in the previous experiment 30 milligrams oral and sublingual YK-11 about an hour before workout, and I did not notice any kind of enhancing effect. Is that due to a lack of bioavailability, whether you take that orally or sublingually, or due to a lack of acute androgen receptor mediated effects when you take that around the workout? It's probably the first option, because when I switched to injectable YK-11, within the first day, basically, in the first workout, I already noticed a change. And certainly the second workout, there was a more pronounced effect, which, again, was a more heightened effect of the YK-11 I took sublingually previously. So day 29 to 42, which is week 5 and 6, I took 15 milligrams injectable YK-11 intramuscularly split bilaterally, 60 or 30 minutes pre-workouts, or 30 milligrams subcutaneously on rest day, total 30 milligrams daily, obviously. So again, if I were to train chest, 15 milligrams, and then go to the gym 30 to 60 minutes later and get a phenomenal super pump, basically acutely. So it seems to have some localized effect when you inject it bilaterally intramuscularly. And from the, let's say the second injection onwards, that is a more pronounced effect. So you have a little bit of spillover. Let's say I would do chest the first day, and then the next day I would do quads intramuscularly, bilaterally, obviously. Then on the quad day, the effects would be a lot more pronounced compared to the first day, where I would inject YK-11 into the chest. I did experience a little bit of post-injection pain. Obviously, I mean, it's a estroless compound in MCT oil that disperses quite rapidly, so I had no lumps and bumps if I were to inject intramuscularly. But if I were to inject 30 milligrams injectable YK-11 subcutaneously, I would have a bump for about 7 to 10 days. And I attribute that to the MCT oil. I got that with various other products in MCT oil if I were to inject that subcutaneously. Never really got that from castor oil, which is the oil which Bayer testosterone uses for its testosterone enanthate formulation, that dispersed and leaves a little bit of an oily lump, obviously, because it takes about 33 days to disperse from the injection depot. But with MCT oil, it seems to disperse a little bit more and then raise the tissue. And that takes about 2 weeks to go away. So going forward, if I were to do an injectable YK-11 experiment again, I would do everything intramuscularly, so I don't have any lumps and bumps. The post-injection pain of YK-11 intramuscularly is not as bad as carnitine or glutathione. It went away post-workout, basically. So the pre-workout injection caused a little bit of post-injection pain, but by the end of the workout, that post-injection pain was gone, and I had no long-lasting post-injection pain or swelling or irritation at the injection sites. Now, I believe that MA produced 30 milligrams per 1 milliliter injectable YK-11 in the past. That's the batch that I used. But nowadays, they have 50 milligrams per 1 milliliter. So that's the batch you'll probably end up using if you decide to go with the injectable YK-11 route. This was my diet throughout the entirety of the experimentation period. The exact same diet I've been following for the majority of this year because I have some digestive issues. I did an elimination diet and a food allergy test, and it basically meant that certain food sources like eggs, for example, I could not eat. So my meals were pretty much the same. Meal 1, 2, 3, and 5 consisted of 150 grams ground beef, 25 grams ground beef liver, 150 grams ground chicken breast, and then 100 to 200 grams of kale, or 100 grams and 100 grams green beans, and then some sauerkraut, some olive oil, salt, and chia seeds on top. And then meal 4 would be 300 grams of salmon, 50 grams of kimchi, some extra chia seeds, Himalayan pink salt, and then 200 grams of blueberries to get a little bit of carbs in post-workout. Now, sometimes meal 3, I would just switch for a pre-workout protein shake containing collagen type 1, 2, and 3 peptides, and then maybe some essential amino acids, depending on how intense my workout was going to be and how full, how stuffed my stomach would be at that point in the day pre-workout, right? And then, sometimes I would add a little bit of tuna instead of beef or replace a meal for more chicken. So my diet was a little bit all over the place, all of the food sources that I could generally eat and digest properly. But this was basically the base diet, consisting of approximately 375 grams of protein, about 90 grams of carbs, 62 or 63 grams of fiber, and 85, sometimes 100 grams of fat over the day for an average food intake of 2,600 to, let's say, 3,000 calories per day. And again, the reason why I'm in a somewhat caloric deficit is because I want to see how much of a contributing factor this epicatogen, YK-11, and soon to be Follistatin 344 actually has on the accrual of muscle mass, even if you're in a caloric deficit. Now, so far, so good. I've been consistently gaining size and strength ever since we started this experiment. I followed the following workout split. Again, it hasn't changed. Monday and Thursday, I would do chest, triceps, shoulders, and abs. Tuesday and Friday, I would do quads, hamstrings, adductors, glutes, and calves. Wednesday and Sunday, I would rest. Sunday would be a refeed and cheese day. And Saturday would be back, rear delts, biceps, maybe a little bit of traps, some posterior chain, and that kind of stuff. My back is kind of, you can see my lats from the front. That's how fat they are. All right. Oh my God, Becky, lats so fat I can see them from the front. So 1 back workout, 2 chest workouts, shoulder workouts, tricep workouts, and 2 leg workouts basically over the week with 2 rest days, one of which I would eat a boatload of food with my wife. And here are the before and after pictures. And I look pretty much the same. If anything, I look fatter than I did before. And I think that's because I went to Bali for a week during this experiment. So I did the oral YK-11 before I went to Bali. During the time I was in Bali, I still went to the gym, but I took my YK-11 sublingually. And then as soon as I came back from Bali, I switched to the injectable YK-11 experiment. But I think I gained a little bit of fat in Bali, unfortunately. So I ended up a little bit softer. And judging by the pictures, I look exactly the same, even though my face and my quads are a little bit more fluffy. So, dude, I wish I had better results. Honestly, I wish I had better results. I feel a lot stronger. I look a lot bigger in the gym. But I think this place that I take my progress pictures is just not a good place to take my progress pictures anymore. Now, what you might notice from my left calf is that it's slowly starting to go away. That has nothing to do with the injectable YK-11 or the epicatogen. I think I have some nerve damage in my lower back, or there's some impingement in my lower back, causing my left calf to atrophy like Dennis Wolf, Wesley Vissers, or Ian Valliere, which is not a bad group to be in, but it's only happening on one side. So my left calf, I can no longer contract properly. I can move the exact same weights on my calf workouts. But yeah, it's slowly going away. And it looks like at the epicatogen experiment, my left calf was a little bit bigger and more defined compared to now. It's honestly very discouraging after bodybuilding for 25 years that this is now happening. I know my legs are a little bit small, but I have a little bit of an excuse by doing that leg surgery. I don't feel 100% comfortable training super heavy on leg day yet. And honestly, 10 to 12 to 15 reps for quads, it doesn't really work for me. Right? I do a ketogenic diet. I should be doing 6 to 8 reps, high weight, high intensity, slow reps, but doing moderate weight, a lot of reps, and still high intensity, but longer time under tension. It doesn't really cut it. Maybe I'm just not eating enough food though. But yeah, it's let's say from the waist up, it's going well, and from the waist down, yeah, embarrassing, to be honest. When switching to the backside, again, it looks pretty much the same, but my lower back is a little bit more chunky. My legs look a little bit bigger now. I have trouble contracting my right calf in the back pose. My hamstrings look a little bit bigger, albeit a little bit more fluffy. And you can clearly see that there's a discrepancy between the calves, especially on my left calf, where I can not really focus or not really contract it properly. Yeah, nerve damage. Great. And I might have a little bit of water retention at this time, right? It's hot in Thailand. I'm eating a lot extra sodium over the day, making me look a little bit more blurry. So again, what I'll do is I'll go to Unreal Gym where they have a posing room. I'll take some progress pictures there. Fingers crossed, those actually look better. And then, I'll overlay those now because from these before and after pictures, I would say that the YK-11 experiment was a failure. Even though I did get stronger in the gym, I did get bigger. My body weight is pretty much the same. And I do notice a very pronounced effect switching from epicatogen to oral, sublingual, and then injectable YK-11, because injectable YK-11, that's PRs upon PRs basically the last 2 weeks. It was a lot of fun to run that experiment or finish off the YK-11 experiment with the injectable version. Like I mentioned before in the epicatogen video, please understand that there's no accurate methods to detect follistatin or myostatin levels in serum. These tests aren't offered generally in the hospitals or the clinics here in Thailand or even in the rest of the world. These are the side effects of chronically elevated follistatin levels, which might show as an impaired hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis, where serum follicle stimulating hormone levels are reduced. This is why follistatin is called follistatin, by reducing follicle stimulating hormone, right? This was the first scientific evidence regarding follistatin that, FSH levels go down. Now, obviously, my FSH levels are in the gutter because I take exogenous testosterone replacement therapy, and I'm not supplementing with recombinant FSH anymore because I have all the semen samples frozen and a boatload of embryos frozen and a healthy daughter on the way. So my FSH days are over. It could show as insulin resistant or hyperglycemia in an elevated blood glucose levels, not in my blood work, elevated fasting insulin levels, not in my blood work, elevated triglyceride levels, not in my blood work, or elevated hemoglobin A1C levels, again, not in my blood work. Follistatin may impair insulin signaling in adipose tissue and promote lipolysis, but based on my before and after pictures, I would say that little lipolysis took place these last 6 months. Actually, I got quite lean for the Bali holiday, but I just gained a little bit of fat by the end of it, which I'm still trying to remove. God damn it. Let's see. Side effects of chronically elevated follistatin levels include hepatic stress or dysfunction, shown as elevated liver enzymes. My liver enzymes did go up, but not to the point I would expect. Certainly not to the point that Superdrol would increase liver enzymes. It might show as thyroid dysfunction by elevated free thyroxine levels, potentially by lowering thyroid binding globulin levels. My thyroxine levels are pretty much identical to the previous blood work results. Shown as kidney stress by elevated creatinine and albumin levels. Creatinine did go up, but I also started training a lot more intensely compared to previously. And they're not in some sort of alarming territory where I feel that my kidneys are going to melt or explode, or fall off my butt cheeks and then run away screaming because the follistatin levels are so increased. Follistatin might show systemic inflammation by elevated high-sensitivity C-reactive protein levels. Now, this was the case with the epicatogen experiment, going from, 1 milligram or half a milligram per liter to 21.8 milligrams per liter. Was that the follistatin or something going wrong with the epicatogen supplement? I think it was the epicatogen. Or it might show as elevated interleukin-6 levels, which I didn't test for, or elevated cystatin C levels. None of my blood work results, actually cystatin C levels went down slightly, and there might be disease risk of elevated follistatin levels chronically, shown as insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Based on my blood work results, I would say that's not the case. So maybe my follistatin levels were not elevated in any way, shape, or form during this YK-11 experiment, and it only happened with epicatogen. But since I got stronger, more muscular, and I would say that's based on the results anecdotally, comparing epicatogen to injectable YK-11 wins hands down. But it's not as potent as injectable follistatin 344, which I had one injection in so far. Well, we'll save that for the other video. So let's get into the blood work results. Comparing the results of March 23rd at the end of the epicatogen experiment to the results of May the 3rd at the end of the YK-11 experiment. In my urinalysis, the results are pretty much the same. Specific gravity came down a little bit because I was better hydrated, meaning that the pH of my urine was slightly higher, a little bit more basic, but still towards the acidic side, 5 compared to 6. And all of the results are negative or normal results. So no glucose, no protein, no blood, no nitrates, no ketones, no urobilinogen, no bilirubin, and no leukocytes in my urine. And red blood cell count, episquamous, bacteria, amorphous cast, crystal, mucus, and budding yeast are all normal to none. Regarding the complete blood count, my white blood cell count increased by 35% from 4,600 to 6,200 cells per cubic millimeter. That could be from the injectable YK-11 because I'm doing more injections, obviously, daily injections for the last 2 weeks of this experiment. And you can also see that on my white blood cell differential that my neutrophils increased a little bit, my lymphocytes came down a little bit, monocytes came down a little bit, eosinophils came up a little bit, which is very common when you inject stuff more frequently. Basophils did exactly the same. So not saying that the injectable YK-11 is impure, but if you're piercing the skin every single day, then stuff like this, a skewing of your white blood cell or an increase of your white blood cell count can definitely occur. Scrolling up again, you see that hemoglobin, hematocrit, and red blood cell count increased, let's say 2 to 3%. So that might mean that YK-11 has some sort of erythropoietic effects. And keep in mind that YK-11 obviously is an anabolic androgenic steroid, and most anabolic androgenic steroids, besides drostanolone, were shown to have some sort of erythropoietic effect, but not to the extent of Anadrol or primobolan acetates, which is used medically to increase red blood cell count in anemic states. And the rest of my complete blood count is pretty much the same or normal results. So red blood cell morphology normal, and maybe due to the erythropoietic effects of YK-11, my red cell distribution width increased by approximately 10% from 13.5% to 14.8%, which is somewhat out of the reference range. So that means that there's a little bit more of a skewed range between the newer red blood cells and the mature red blood cells, which are soon to be destroyed. Or it's just a matter of time because, again, it's been 6 weeks, and how these red blood cells are formed, whether YK-11 is in the picture or not, has a little bit of a size-changing effect. I'm not entirely sure. I can't find anything in scientific evidence because the scientific evidence on YK-11, well, paper thin. And the rest of the complete blood count results are normal or non-detected. Moving over to blood chemistry and kidney function, blood glucose is pretty much the same, an increase of 3%. Nothing to report there. Blood urea nitrogen also increased by, let's say, 3.5% from 24.8 to 25.7 milligrams per deciliter, and is now slightly, well, basically towards the top of the reference range. Did not change anything to my protein intake. If anything, I'm drinking a lot more water, but still BUN levels increased somewhat. Is that from chronically elevated follistatin levels? Maybe, who knows? Creatinine increased from 1.42 to 1.48 milligrams per deciliter, an increase of 4%, albeit on March 30th, a week after discontinuing the ipicatogen, my creatinine was 1.38 milligrams per deciliter. I would say that that's a normal increase from protein metabolism, creatine metabolism, and skeletal muscle because I'm training a lot harder and I'm hitting PRs left and right thanks to the injectable YK-11. Cystatin C came down by 3% from 0.74 to 0.72 milligrams per liter. Uric acid came down slightly. Again, I'm a little bit more hydrated because it's hotter in Thailand, even though blood urea nitrogen did go up. So am I more hydrated or less hydrated? Confusing. Creatine phosphokinase increased by 50% from 1,850 to 2,700 units per liter. On March 30th, a week after stopping the epicatogen and taking a little bit of time off from the gym, it was 1,300 units per liter. So it went down and then shot up to double, basically, after another 5 weeks on YK-11. Because training on YK-11, especially injectable YK-11, also pleasurable. Lactose dehydrogenase, an increase of 1%, nothing to report here. Lactose dehydrogenase is another metabolic marker of skeletal muscle contractions, just like creatine phosphokinase. And I'm happy to report that at the end of the YK-11 experiment, my high-sensitivity C-reactive protein went from 21.8 milligrams per liter, which is atrocious. Thank you very much, epicatogen. Went down by 98.2% to 0.4 milligrams per liter. 1 week after discontinuing the epicatogen on March 30th, my high-sensitivity C-reactive protein was 2.8 milligrams per liter. So within 1 week of stopping the epicatogen, a dramatic reduction from 21.8 to 2.8 milligrams per liter. And then for the last 5 weeks that I was running various YK-11 administration routes, inflammation came even lower and no signs of terrible inflammation present. Thank you very much. So long story short, regarding inflammation, epicatogen bad, YK-11 good. Moving over to serum lipids, pretty much the same, albeit a dramatic reduction in triglyceride levels. Maybe that's because follistatin levels decreased dramatically or because I started training harder. I think it's the latter. So triglycerides came down from 47 to 23 milligrams per deciliter, a dramatic reduction of 51.1%. And all of the other lipids are pretty much the same. So, of course, it came down slightly, let's say 6 to 3%. So total cholesterol came down 7%, HDL 7%, and LDL 3%. Is that the addition of the YK-11 or the switch from citrus bergamot to amla extract? It's probably both. But for running 835 milligrams anabolic androgenic steroids per week, including the enanthate ester, I would say that these results are not bad. So thank you, amla extract, thank you, ezetimibe, and thank you, YK-11, for not being so terrible on lipid parameters. And lipoprotein little a, apolipoprotein A1 and B are all within normal parameters. So I would say that injectable YK-11 is pretty relatively safe for your lipids, assuming that you do daily fasted cardio, take your ezetimibe, amylo extract, or citrus bergamot, and shut the fuck up. Liver panel. A small reduction or increase in total protein, albumin to globulin ratio. You do see that total bilirubin and direct bilirubin shot up by, let's say, 75 to 87%. So that's a dramatic increase. Could be additional red blood cell destruction or more metabolism of hemoglobin into bilirubin. Again, bilirubin is a metabolic waste product of hemoglobin. And as your red blood cells are destroyed or recycled, they release hemoglobin, and thus bilirubin levels go up. Or I get a lot of enterohepatic recirculation of the bilirubin, meaning that it's excreted normally, but it's reabsorbed in the enterohepatic recirculation and thus ends up in the bloodstream. Still taking my TUTCA, still taking my fibers, still taking all of these stuff. So I would say that this is, it could be expected from the increase of anabolic androgenic steroids, adding the YK-11 on top. But I would honestly say that that effect would be a little bit delayed after I would take the YK-11 out and that erythropoietic signaling is reduced. So I'll have to keep my eye on this. I'm not alarmed. Right? It's still within normal parameters. Last time it's actually quite low. And I've seen my total bilirubin and direct bilirubin within these ranges many a time on cycles, which included boldenone or anadrol or just high-dose test or test and primo together, which all potentiate a good amount of erythropoiesis. RBC goes up, hematocrit goes up, and then in the metabolism of RBC releasing, or in the destruction of red blood cells, releasing their hemoglobin and metabolizing that into bilirubin, these numbers are, well, to be expected. Liver enzymes did go up slightly. AST increased by 8% from 99 to 107 units per liter on March 30th after a week of rest and taking the epicatogen out. It was 67 units per liter. ALT increased by 21.4% from 56 to 68 units per liter. On March 30th, it was 46, so that's slightly lower than March 23rd. So all in all, it did go up, and I would attribute that to training intensity, not actual liver stress, because, well, all the other markers are somewhat normal, even though bilirubin increased. But again, we can explain it away through different pathways, because gamma glutamyl transferase, gamma GT, went down by 9% from 11 to 10 units per liter. Iron levels. Ferritin dropped down by 17% from 194 to 161 nanograms per milliliter. On March the 30th, it was 188. So that's a slight reduction over time. And serum iron came up slightly. Again, last time it was abysmally low at 50 micrograms per deciliter after, well, what I expect a month of chronic inflammation due to the epicatogen experiment. And serum iron levels dropping is just a side effect of being chronically elevated, even though at the time I did not really feel to be chronically elevated. So I'm happy to see that serum iron is increasing, 14% increase from 50 to 57 micrograms per deciliter. And but that also means that if I'm eating a boatload of beef containing heme iron, which is highly bioavailable, and supplementing with vitamin C, which helps with iron absorption, that my iron stores are not sufficient. The recycling from the hemoglobin resulting into more serum iron is also not sufficient. So I'm going to have to start supplementing iron on top of my iron intake coming from beef, and also supplement with a little bit of copper just to make sure that iron absorption alongside vitamin C is sufficient. And then I'll recheck this in 2 weeks and a couple of weeks from now as this diet with iron supplementation and copper supplementation is proceeding, basically. Thyroid panel, small changes. I would say that these are normal. Total T3 reduction of 7%, free T3 a reduction of 12%, total T4 an increase of 14%, and free T4 an increase of 15%. Thyroid stimulating hormone came down by almost 50% from 3.5 to 1.8. Micro IUs per milliliter. And honestly, based on these results, I don't think that has anything to do with follistatin levels, somehow changing thyroxine levels in serum. I think this is just a normal fluctuation. And because, well, T3 levels came down, T4 levels came up, but TSH levels came down. And since this is all occurring in a pulsatile fashion, probably the next time I test thyroid function again, it's closer to March 23rd, the results, and we just go back and forth. Again, I'm not on any thyroid supplementation, and I'm not on any growth hormone. So I think this is just a normal fluctuation due to the pulsatile fashion of thyroid hormones. And finally, the sex hormones. Let me know down below if you use the timestamps to skip ahead to the sex hormones. Let me know if you like sex, period, just like I do. Serum cortisol, a reduction of 18% from 12 to 9.8 micrograms per deciliter. Does that mean that YK-11 has some sort of glucocorticoid blocking effect, albeit not through the receptor and not stemming from the scientific evidence? In the scientific evidence, it shows in vitro studies that YK-11 has no binding capacity for the glucocorticoid receptor, but maybe through another pathway, it lowers cortisol levels. And again, I remember on the previous blood work results when I was running YK-11 with polypharmacy, testosterone, nandrolone, testosterone, oxymetholone, and growth hormone, and Increlex, and the ancillaries, that my cortisol was also quite low. So maybe there's an overlapping effect of YK-11 here, but I'm just speculating based on these, very small, limited set of data. Estradiol, a 16.3% reduction from 217.8 to just 182.4 picograms per milliliter. That's a reduction of 16.3%. Now, does that prove that YK-11 is an aromatase inhibitor? To a certain extent. I kept my testosterone dose exactly the same, the injection route exactly the same. Basically, my body fat levels are exactly the same too, right? So I can't say that I got leaner over these last 6 weeks, even though I was a little bit leaner before I went to Bali. But I gained that body fat right back, and now I actually look worse. Shame on me. F you, Steve, for doing such a terrible job with these before and after experiments. It's the best I can do, man. I have a life besides drug experiments. So a reduction of 16.3%, I would say, is dramatic, because when you look at it logically, 625 milligrams testosterone and 210 milligrams YK-11, discounting for the estrogen stuff, right? Let's say that's a 1-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio. 625 to 210, a 3-to-1 ratio. In a 1-to-1 ratio of testosterone to primo, or testosterone to boldenone, or testosterone to masterone, again, not for everybody, but for some individuals, masterone also lowers serum estradiol levels. In a 1-to-1 ratio, most of the time, you can expect a 50% reduction. So you have, let's say, 625 milligrams testosterone, you add in 625 milligrams primo or boldenone or masterone, and serum estradiol comes down by half. By half. Now, I did a 3-to-1 ratio. So if you divide 50% by 3, you get 16.7%. And this is pretty close. So I would say for a dose comparison regarding serum estradiol reduction, this is actually a very promising result. And I've seen guys on TRT that did like 210 or 200 milligrams testosterone enanthate and then added in injectable YK-11 or oral YK-11 at 30 milligrams per day. They got a 50% or close to 50% reduction in serum estradiol levels, because a lot of you guys sent in your blood work. I was running a gamma test and started injectable YK-11 and it came down by 10%, but I was also using an aromatase inhibitor or primo or something else in the picture, but serum estradiol still came down with a solid percentage. I was running TRT of 150 to 200 milligrams testosterone, added in the oral YK-11, and serum estradiol dropped by 50%. And now I no longer need an aromatase inhibitor. I think I've seen about 6 or 7, maybe 9 blood work results that you guys sent in over the last 6 weeks. And it seems to be quite conclusive that YK-11 does lower serum estradiol levels. But again, if you do the injectable YK-11 at, let's say, 30 milligrams per day, 210 milligrams per week, and you're running a hefty dose of testosterone like I was, TRT for 3 people, then your serum estradiol will not reduce by 50%, but for a, let's say, a ratio-dependent fashion. So if it's 3-to-1, 625 to 210, then you get a 16 or 17% reduction in serum estradiol levels. Now, going forward, I'm going to stop the YK-11, obviously, switch to Follistatin 344, and use a fucking good amount of exemestane aromasin, because after, well, it's been 10 weeks on high estradiol. Luckily, my gyno didn't come back, but I'm kind of tired of it. I'm kind of tired of being a blood monster, especially at the end of the day where my face is super round. You guys wanted to see if YK-11 or epicatogen acted as an aromatase inhibitor. YK-11, yes. Epicatogen, no. And Follistatin 344 probably also no. So I'm going to add in the aromasin, the exemestane back in, and bring this estradiol down to a healthy amount, to a respectable amount where I can actually see some definition in my body, discounting for the fat that is accumulating from holidays, and then bring it down to what, 45, 50 picograms per milliliter, so I actually can look somewhat good, discounting for the nerve damage in my calves. Progesterone increased by 30% from 0.17 to 0.22 nanograms per milliliter, is now out of the reference range. is that the YK-11 detecting as progesterone or progesterone metabolizing less into aldosterone or some of the other metabolic intermediates downstream? I'm not sure. Again, I couldn't find anything in scientific evidence that YK-11 detects as progesterone. It's not progesterone based. If anything, it had some structural similarities with 19-testosterone derivatives. It could be due to non-sensitive testing, or again, some sort of metabolism that happens from progesterone or inhibition of progesterone metabolism downstream. Maybe due to progesterogenic signaling, my prolactin went up, or a dopamine deficiency, could be both. Let's see, a 22% increase in prolactin from 11.4 to 13.95 nanograms per milliliter, still within the reference range. My libido is good. My erections are rock hard. Don't you worry. Total testosterone, free testosterone, bioavailable testosterone, I didn't test because this, chemiluminescence microparticle immunoassay, CMIA, only goes up to 3,450 nanograms per deciliter of my total testosterone. And when you go over an ampule of bare testifirin, 2 ampules per week, then it's undetectably high, so why waste the money? And it happened also for dietary testosterone, unfortunately. The conversion of 625 milligrams testosterone enanthate into dietary testosterone through the 5-alpha reductase enzymes, potentially isoform type 2, in the scalp and skin of me personally, is very high. So my dietary testosterone on March 23rd, after 2 weeks to 3 weeks waiting, came back at over 2,500 picograms per milliliter. They use ELISA testing, which is enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. And I retested this in the absolute hope that it went from slightly over 2,500 picograms per milliliter to slightly below 2,500 picograms per milliliter and is now detectable. So again, maybe 2 to 3 weeks from now, after I get those results, I'll post them down below. Please remind me if I forget. I'll post those results down below. If dietary testosterone came from undetectably high to somewhat detectable, let's say 2,499 picograms per milliliter, then maybe we have proof that YK-11 also acts as a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, just like it acts clearly here on this blood work results and other blood work results, that YK-11 acts as an aromatase inhibitor as well. And then maybe you have a double whammy. Doesn't mean that it can prevent gyno or prevent hair loss, but at least you get some additional beneficial effects and you don't have to make those other compounds to keep your estradiol and DHT levels suppressed. But honestly, my DHT levels are like 1,800 picograms per milliliter naturally. And naturally, my serum testosterone is 800 to 900 nanograms per deciliter on HCG. Well, that's the naturally, obviously. So naturally, my serum testosterone was like 600 nanograms per deciliter with a DHT level of 1,800 picograms per milliliter. So I would expect, let's say that is a linear trend upwards. So if my total testosterone right now would be, let's say, 5,000 nanograms per deciliter times 3, it will be 15,000 picograms per milliliter on my dietary testosterone level. And then no amount of YK-11 is going to bring that down to a detectable range. So don't get your hopes up, but I will still post the results. And then maybe we get something to see. If you live in the United States and you can do blood work at Merrick Health, do the blood work for me. They have liquid chromatography, tandem mass spectrometry on total testosterone, estradiol, and dietary testosterone. I can actually do high sensitivity testing. And unfortunately, I can't send my blood work results in because that would take even longer for those blood work results to come back. And since I don't live in the United States, these American-based hormone optimization and male health clinics cannot service me, even me, a sponsored athlete. But if I go to the United States, I would be able to do it. But I'm not going to travel to the US twice for these kinds of blood work results. I'm sure you guys can understand. A dramatic reduction in SHBG levels. Last time was 46.8 nanomoles per liter in the range, even on testosterone, but that's probably because serum estradiol was so goddamn high. And now it reduced by 61% to 18.3 nanomoles per liter, meaning that YK-11 has significantly lowered my SHBG levels while slightly lowering my estradiol levels. So again, androgen binding from YK-11 to SHBG drops dramatically, and then by dropping estradiol levels slightly, 16.3%, SHBG production went down also, and thyroid hormones are pretty much the same, so I don't think that thyroid hormone had an effect in this lowering of sexual binding globulin. DHA sulfate, pretty much the same since the last time. Again, supplementation is the same. Growth hormone levels came down somewhat. YK-11 has terrible negative effects on your growth hormone secretion. I think it's just a pulsatile fashion of growth hormone. So that's a reduction of 4%. IGF-1 came up by 6%, so maybe that's a negative feedback of IGF-1 into growth hormone secretion. Again, pulsatile, guys. Normal results, I would say. IGF-1 binding protein 3, an increase of 6%. Insulin came up slightly, a 5% increase from 2 to 2.1 micro IUs per milliliter. No observed effect from chronically elevated follistatin levels here. And hemoglobin A1C exactly the same. These were my blood work results. If you have additional blood work results, please share them down below. Did YK-11, particularly injectable YK-11, lower your serum estradiol levels? Did it lower your serum DHT levels? Did it increase your liver enzymes, inflammatory markers, your creatine phosphokinase, lactose dehydrogenase, and creatinine levels, and maybe liver enzymes, indicating that you're training balls to the wall because injectable YK-11 is so god potent, way more potent than oral or sublingual YK-11. So in this sense, the community was absolute 100% correct. Injectable YK-11 beats oral YK-11 and sublingual YK-11 out of the water and certainly puts epicatogen to shame. So, thank you guys so much for the suggestion. I don't think I would have run injectable YK-11 if it wasn't for you guys egging me on for this experiment, even though I would like to have seen a little bit better results, but that's totally my fault, right? I went to Bali, I ate like an asshole, I drank a little bit too much and restored a little bit of body fat. I think if my body fat levels were a little bit lower, you would see more dramatic changes, even though I feel that my muscularity did not improve that much, to be honest. But maybe I just need to take better pictures going forward. Fingers crossed those unreal pictures that I will take in the posing room look a little bit better. Now, from the second injection onwards, I would say that it already starts to work. So the first injection, you notice a little bit more pronounced effect if you take the injectable YK-11 pre-workout. But from the second injection onwards, it's night and day. Yeah, it works quite fast, similar to injectable testosterone suspension or Winstrol suspension, or Trembolone suspension, or injectable Anadrol. From the second injection onwards, you notice a dramatic change in how your body works in the gym. And then I started hitting PRs upon PRs upon PRs, close to the PRs that I was hitting when I was fully sauced a couple years ago. I mean, 625 tests and a little bit of injectable YK-11, no growth hormone or Incalex, no insulin, is not fully sauced. It's just a little bit more than, it's TRT++, okay? No, plus, yeah. TRT for 3 people plus the YK-11. Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Again, I was close to my all-time strongest, certainly a lot stronger than on YK-11, almost as strong as when I was running a full-blown steroid cycle a couple months back in a caloric surplus. I think I came one increment below my maxes, let's say 6 months ago when I was eating 5,500 calories and running this cocktail of polypharmacy with testosterone, trestolone, oxymetholone, and oral YK-11. So injectable YK-11, again, quite potent, even in a caloric deficit. The downside is that I also noticed from the second injection onward that it became more irritable. Yeah, and I get this with injectable Winstrol, injectable suspension, injectable Trembolone, obviously. Never experienced irritability with injectable Anadrol, but from the second injection onwards, the strength went up, but the irritability also went up. And you become a little bit argumentative and unreasonable towards the end of this injectable YK-11 cycle. I did not experience this in any way, shape, or form on the oral or sublingual YK-11. And I would compare the injectable YK-11 at 210 milligrams per week to, let's say, 50 to 100 milligrams trembolone acetate weekly regarding the irritability and the argumentative nature and unreasonable nature that you have. Because, yeah, it started to get to me. I'm going to be a little bit honest. And this is one of the reasons why I'll probably not run injectable YK-11 again, because as a soon-to-be father, I have a little bit more responsibilities than looking jacked and having PRs in the gym. And I can get similar jackness and similar results and similar strength in the gym just by increasing my testosterone or adding a little bit of Primo. And if I go to 600 tests, 600 Primo, I think I can get comparable results regarding how I look, how I feel, minus the irritability. And that's more desired for me at this point in my life. I would say that the fullness of YK-11 is compared to oral Superdrol at the exact same dosage. So if you compare 30 milligrams injectable YK-11 to 30 milligrams oral Superdrol, I say that the fullness is pretty much the same. And that means that since injectable YK-11 doesn't raise your liver enzymes or with your lipids, or gives you this CNS burnout, right, central nervous system fatigue that you get with oral Superdrol, even though the PRs in Superdrol, oral Superdrol, are a little bit higher, maybe an increment or two higher. So the strength is a little bit higher, but the fullness is pretty much the same. So, I mean, you could say that I'm on oral Superdrol, right? Not entirely. Superdrol would be a little bit fuller, but I feel it's very comparable. And again, if there's not so much liver stress or lipid changes, or zero lipid changes in this case, then I would prefer injectable YK-11 over oral Superdrol. Cosmetically, I would say that injectable YK-11 falls somewhere in between Turinabol or Anavar. It's a little bit hard to determine because, again, I'm a little bit watery now due to the heat and the additional water retention from the estradiol. And well, getting fat on Bali, that's shame on me. That's totally my fault, but it happens. Sometimes you just got to fucking chill and eat the fuck up. And again, I increased my sodium intake here in Thailand because the temperature increased quite a bit. When I go out to train in the gym without air conditioning, I sweat buckets, meaning that I don't want to go cramping, obviously, during my training session. And then my sodium intake needs to come up, but that also means from the second meal onwards, I look a little bit like a water boy. So, I'm doing the best I can. I'm hanging on for dear life here, guys. Regarding what injectable YK-11 smells like, doesn't smell like anything because it's suspended in MCT oil, and it's nothing like those old school injectable Anadrol or injectable methyltranolone, aka methyltren formulations produced in glycol. I mean, the bottle arrives in your house and you could smell it through the package, and then you almost don't want to inject. And then when you do inject, you're literally dissolving your muscles from the inside. So don't do that. The injectable YK-11 doesn't smell or taste like anything, which I guess is a good thing. And to answer the question, will I ever run injectable YK-11 again? Let's put it this way. If I ever feel like running oral Superdrol again for a photo shoot or stepping on stage, a 1 in a million chance that's going to happen with all of the responsibilities that I have. If I feel like running Superdrol for whatever reason, I'll probably replace that with injectable YK-11 because, again, liver enzymes are less dramatically changed. Lipids don't seem to budge. I don't get this central nervous system fatigue that I would other guys get from Superdrol, making me feel toxic after 7 days, and then you persist for another 7 days, and then you feel horrendous after 14 days on 30 milligram Superdrol. So if I ever feel like running Superdrol again, I'll replace that with injectable YK-11 at the exact same dose, 30 milligrams per day, with the exact same injection protocol like I discussed in this video. And then it's just a matter of time for the trenbolone irritability to manifest. And then I might still throw it in the trash or give it to some other bodybuilder in need. Let me know down below your personal experience with YK-11. Did you like it? You didn't like it? What was your results? Did it compare to Superdrol or trenbolone or Turinabol or Anavar, right? There's not so many anecdotal reports on injectable YK-11 besides Reddit, but I don't really trust those Reddit reports because there's no before and after blood work, no before and after pictures, even though, again, my before and after pictures could have done better. My sincere apologies. I took the pictures, I looked at it, I did the comparison, and was like, shame on you, Steve. Well, it is what it is. The next experiment is going to be 1 milligram Follistatin 344. If you have experience with Follistatin 344 or Follistatin 288, 300, 315, let us know down below in the comment section so I can prepare. I did one injection yesterday, 500 micrograms split bilaterally. Man, it's so pumped and it's so sore and the contraction was so good. Almost made me cry. But well, let's save that for the Follistatin 344 deep dive. I think that Follistatin 344 is going to blow injectable YK-11 out of the water. And then it's just a matter of budget because that shit ain't cheap. All right, I'll leave it here. Do your blood work over at Merck Health. Get your pre-workouts at Gorilla Mind. Get your male beauty products over at Intelligent Shop. Get your over-the-counter supplements, like all the crazy supplements I just listed, over at iHerb or Gorilla Mind. They sell those over-the-counter supplements too. And if you can't find something specific, head over to my website, vigoroussteve.com. I got a lot of free articles for your reading pleasure that could send you all over the internet for additional research. And then whatever I discussed in this video will be even more explained to you guys. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A injectable YK-11, 30 milligrams per day, front double bicep for you guys. I think it's not bad. Maybe the pictures don't show it, but I mean, I think I look pretty hard and dense. Anyway, I'll take some pictures at Unreal Gym, and fingers crossed I actually look better than the pictures I took this morning. So let's finish this video off with a Captain Picard face palm, and I'll see you guys in the next one.